welcome to the 8th AVO webinar. Thank you guys for joining. This one will be a unique one, a special one. I'm going to start with a little bit of my story, a little bit of background as to how I went vegan and how I got into animal rights activism. And that'll be really short, maybe like 5-10 minutes. And then the rest of the time will all be about answering your questions. So thank you to anyone who submitted some questions in advance. And you have the Q&A function in the webinar, so please feel free at any point. It could be something about my story and what I tell you guys and how I got here, or something that you've already thought of that you wanted to ask on this webinar. So let me start by sharing a little bit about me and how I got here. So I've been vegan for about 7 years, and I first came across veganism from a coworker. She was another manager at this travel company that I worked for, and she was vegan. And I was always like, why would someone do that? Like, that just sounds way too crazy, way too restrictive. So one day I just went into her office, I closed the door and I sat down and said, okay, tell me why would you do that? And she handed me a piece of paper. She wrote down, she's like on a Post-it note, and she scribbled down the name of a documentary. She said, watch this, and then you'll understand. And so she didn't even tell me anything. She just gave me the documentary. I said, okay, cool. And it wasn't that night, but soon after that, I sat down with my girlfriend at the time, and we watched Forks Over Knives. And Forks Over Knives was eye-opening. I had never thought about the impact that food has on my health. And I never really thought, I mean, obviously you understand that, but I never really consciously thought about it. And I was always relatively healthy, relatively in shape. And so it was just kind of something I didn't think about. But when I saw that, I was like, okay, well, that makes a lot of sense. One, I don't want to get sick later on in life. And knowing that there was a way of eating in a more healthy way that still involved delicious foods and could potentially help me avoid and even reverse any potential damage I had already caused to my body, I was like, okay, I'm going to start trying to eat healthier. But what happened was I definitely started eating healthier, more plant-based, I guess, but it was really, really difficult and at the time impossible for me to give up all the foods that I was used to, all the animal-based foods. So, but I was still, my interest was piqued. I was curious about, this, this idea of veganism. So I kept doing research, and then one day came across the documentary Earthlings, which most people have seen. And actually there's a good question about that coming up from Anne. So I'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, I watched Earthlings and with my girlfriend at the time, and it was just, gut-wrenching. It was horrible. I cried through most of it. And I just was shocked at what we do to these other living beings, these animals who most of us care about. It was just mind-blowing. Anyway, long story short, at the end of that documentary, I went vegan 100%. I was like absolutely 100% done. I could not imagine participating or supporting that industry anymore, participating in or supporting. So I just quit. And that was it. That was 7 years ago. And it was probably one of the easiest decisions I've made in my life. I did have some prior knowledge about the nutritional aspect. So that helped kind of helped me realize that there was the personal benefit to me. But what really motivated me was the impact that I could have on others, on non-human animals. So that was my journey into veganism. And then activism started with a vigil. I went to a Toronto Cow Save vigil for the first time in Toronto in November of 2014. And I saw cows in the truck. I remember walking up to the truck and looking down at the feet, and they were just covered in like poop, and it was just disgusting. And then I looked up and I saw this black cow, probably a dairy cow, looking at me. And I looked at her, and we just kind of stared at each other for a while, and you could see like the fear on her face. She was just, very anxious and nervous to be in this truck. And it was the first time that I ever really like connected with a cow, that I just like looked at a cow in the eye and thought about life from her perspective for, you know, a few seconds. And it was that moment that just kind of sparked this, I don't know what you want to call it, but like a desire to help, a fire kind of to help these individuals. And that's what led me to get into activism. And so started doing vigils and disruptions. And, you know, I was working full time, ended up trying to find a way to do this more consistently, and ended up, you know, leaving my career as a corporate sales director and working in activism, and eventually started AVO. And AVO, as you guys all know, is really an organization that is dedicated to providing professional learning and development opportunities for animal rights activists, which is very fitting, I think, based on my background, because it's what I used to do for corporate salespeople, was provide them with support and you know, leadership coaching and communication training. And so I tried to kind of put all those things together into AVO and make that part of my contribution to the animal rights movement. So that's the background. For anyone who might not be fully familiar with AVO, there are three main kind of things that I offer through AVO. So it's the webinars, it's the one-on-one leadership coaching, which anyone can book through the AVO website, amazingveganoutreach.com. And the last one are which are probably my favorite, the in-person workshops. So there's a bunch of in-person workshops coming up this year, and you can, I'll try to keep the schedule as updated as possible on the AVO website. And you can always see if there's a workshop coming to your city. It's 2 days long. It is really immersive and intense and fun and educational, and it's a really, really good experience. So I would recommend it if you guys are able to attend. And besides that, that's my story, I think, up until now. So if you guys have any questions about my background coming into this, please let me know. I'm going to open up the Q&A section here so I can see that. And so I can see the chat. Okay. I can see the Q&A. Cool. Okay. I'm going to try and, let me see where I start here. So, okay, let's start with these Q&As here. Vivian, so as being an organizer of vigils and workshops and other events, what tips do you have to increase volunteer attendance? Great question. Wow, cool question to start. Well, one thing that I know that we have to do well, which it's just a reality because we're competing for people's attention, we're competing against so many different things, interesting things, which is good, is market ourselves well. So whenever you're organizing an event, you have to keep that event on the top of people's minds. People will easily get distracted. People will register for an event like a webinar or a workshop and then completely forget about it. So it's your job, I think, or it's our job as organizers to help remind them in a friendly way, to also expect that it's just a reality that, you know, a certain percentage of people who register will show and another percentage won't show. It's just how it goes. So, if you kind of what's the word I'm looking for here? Overestimate or underestimate, I'm not sure, my brain's not working. But, if you get 30 registrations for an event, you can expect a much lower percentage of people to show up. And so plan for that. I know I plan for that in my workshops. I know that if I have, 75 registrations, there's probably going to be between like 50 and 60 people that show up. So it's good to recognize that. And obviously the more you organize events, you'll get a better feel for how many people will actually show. But market it, and make things interesting. Like try and share content that people will find engaging, that they'll interact with, to help Facebook and Instagram kind of boost those posts with their algorithms. I'm not an expert in that. That's probably one of my bigger challenges with this work that I do, is kind of promoting it. And also, it's a little awkward to kind of be self-promoting and that sort of thing. So you have to kind of get over that, because if you don't do things like that, then people won't hear about your events. And the people that do want to go won't be able to go. So that's, share your events if you think that they're relevant and people will be interested in them. Share them in as many groups as you can. And then maybe one last thing is when you are at the event. So whether you're at a cube or a vigil or whatever, even a social gathering, as organizers, think of yourselves. I mean, you are leaders in the movement, and think of yourself as such and act like that. So try your best, to lead by example. Try your best to be inclusive. Try your best to engage people, to talk to people. If people show up to your whatever event, be the person that's proactively reaching out to them, that's going up to them and welcoming them and saying hello. And especially if it's their first time, make people feel special because they are. Make sure that they understand how much you appreciate them being there, how much you appreciate their work. It's one of those kind of necessary things that we all need. I need that too. I thrive off that. It is a big motivator for me, knowing that people value some of the work that I do. So I want to keep doing it. So think about what you need. And maybe not just what you need, but there's different personality types. Different people need different things. But yeah, give people that. So that's kind of a long answer, but I hope it's useful. You know what? Actually, because we have a lot of time, when I'm going through the questions, I'll also be checking the chat. So if I'm answering a question and you have like follow-up questions, or you want to question something that I'm talking about, pop it into the chat, and I'll do my best to be mindful of it. So, here you go, Olivia. If you have the opportunity, offering some cool vegan food at the event helps. Yeah, that's a really good one. Actually, just a quick shout out to the organizers in Atlanta. There's a workshop coming up there next weekend, and they've taken care of organizing food for everybody. So that, of course, it's going to encourage some people, to come out and or more people to come out, I should say, or just sweeten the pot. And I'm obviously excited to go there, and more excited that we're going to have some delicious food. So yes, or potlucks. Yeah, potlucks are great. Any sort of social events where you can encourage people to contribute. And it's really nice to like get to an event and people have brought their own food and contributed and made it themselves. So yeah, that's nice. So, answer live. Sarah, do you know of a way to do activism when we are stuck in a bed like I am? I have a disability. I do cubes when my body can handle it, or I cook for, oh wow, that's really cool, for L 214, French Association, but I want to do more, and L 214 is a really cool organization. So, wow, that's really cool. And first of all, I love that you brought up the idea of cooking, and that to me is something that is like somewhat outside the box. A lot of people don't think about that as a form of activism, let's say, but it's so important that we have people throughout the community supporting activists. Like my role now has really taken quite a bit of a shift from like the front lines to behind the scenes and supporting the people that want to do this work. And that's a great example of that, cooking. I know in Toronto, we're so fortunate to have some people, I'm thinking specifically of two people, Rara and Brian, who are kind of the self-appointed food providers, and they make delicious food, and they bring like tons of food to events all the time. They're always cooking and preparing food for people. And it's just beautiful, and people really appreciate it. It fuels us. It gives us energy to do the work that we have to do. So I think that's a phenomenal way. And yeah, of course, cubes and from home. I mean, I think that one way of thinking about it, and I don't, maybe if I think of specific answers, I'll give them to you, but think about how you can support activists. You're already doing that, but for anyone else listening, if you're trying to like increase your activism, you have some free time, think about how you can support the community. Think about how you can support individual activists. Reach out to people proactively and say, hey, I really appreciate the work that you do. What can I do to help? And if you have some free time, that's one way to do that. Another way to do that, obviously, funding is really important. People that are doing this work and doing this work like full time. If you want to continue seeing people do that type of work, for example, a great example is like Earthling Ed. He wrote this ebook. The ebook is like, I don't know, it's like 100 and some odd pages. It's a really good ebook, when you download it, if it's valuable to you, throw him $1 or $2 or $5 or $10 or whatever you can afford, But, a lot of people are doing this work kind of out of the goodness of their hearts, and they need some like really small, tiny bit of financial support to do that, obviously myself included. But that's another way you can really help and support the movement. Okay, Olivia. So was recently listening to an old podcast from that vegan couple, TBC, cool, talking about when to speak up and when to shut up about veganism. Interesting, okay. So for example, they suggested you may not want to speak up for the animals when you're meeting a new boss. Do you have any of these shut up moments? Oh, that's a good question. Yes, I do. I have a lot of shut up moments. How do I clearly communicate that? Like when I'm normally doing outreach, when my goal is to do, to help people think about this topic, one thing that I realize, and this goes for coaching as well. So this is where I kind of got this, it was kind of trained into me. When you're a coach and you're offering coaching to people, the other party, the person who's being coached, the coachee, has to be a willing participant in that conversation. So if that person isn't ready to be coached or to have that conversation, it's not normally going to go well. So ideally, I either wait for or try to create situations where it's appropriate to talk about that. And, I want to talk about it, but I also don't want to be that annoying vegan where people are just like sick and tired of hearing about me. What I've realized is that I just heard this the other day. So this was so cool. I went into the Apple store yesterday, and I used to work for Apple a long time ago. And I ran into this guy that I used to work with. And, we haven't been in touch. I always really liked him and respected him. We just never kept in touch after I left. And I was in the Apple store chatting with him, and he said, "Hey man, I see what you're up to. It's amazing the work that you're doing." And he knew about the work that I was doing. And I was like, how does this guy know about this? He never comments, never likes anything on Facebook, but he follows, he watches what's going on. And that to me is important, because that's not the first time it's happened. It's happened a lot where people reach out to you, or you get, and people know about, and they see the work that you do. And when you're leading in a positive way and you're not coming across as annoying all the time, I think people are more open and more receptive to the message. So I know it's kind of a vague answer, but trying to create opportunities and waiting, being patient. I don't have to. Another example is on Tuesday nights, I go and I throw axes. I'm part of an axe throwing league. And it's we throw axes at targets. Anyway, super Canadian. And the people that are there, nobody else is vegan. And I've been, throwing with them for the last few years. And I know I kind of they pick on me a little bit for being vegan, and I kind of push back at them sometimes. I've won a few championships in the league, and so whenever I win, I take off my shirt, and underneath I'm wearing a vegan shirt with a message, just to rub it in their faces, and jokingly, right? So I take it in stride, and I don't mind some jokes at my expense sometimes. But at the end of the day, they're really curious. And then they, when we're standing around, maybe having a beer, they come up and they start asking me questions about it. And they're genuinely interested in it. The other day, one of the guys showed up and he said, "Hey, I have something to show you." I'm like, "Okay, what?" And he reaches into his pocket and he pulls out this big receipt, like this long, from the grocery store. He's like, "Check it out. No meat. I went to the grocery store and I bought a fully plant-based, I did a full plant-based shop for all my family, for his kids and his wife." And I was like, "Well, that's really cool." And we started talking about it. And it's people are thinking about this and dealing with it and questioning themselves, even when you don't see it. So just try to be that positive example, I think, while not letting people run over you, but also not taking like those little insults, those little jabs. I kind of take them, I roll with them, I kind of laugh and I push back and that sort of thing. So, but I don't take myself too seriously, even though it's a serious topic, you know? So it's this balance that I try to find. So I hope that helps. Someone at a cube, Sarah again. Oh, sorry, I'll go answer live here. Someone at a cube last week accused me to be against abortion because I'm vegan. As a feminist, I was shocked and I didn't know what to answer. Sorry, let me just process that question for a second here. So, okay. I mean, in general, that is just one of those situations, it seems like, when people try to distract from the issue. So they'll bring up whatever it is. They'll bring up some sort of a human rights issue. They'll bring up war or famine or abortion or whatever. They'll bring up whatever topic that they want to use to, usually it's like, try to call you out on being a hypocrite. That's kind of the idea. And so if they can invalidate, your message that way, then great. It kind of relieves their conscience of this issue. So that takes a little bit of tact. First of all, I don't normally engage. I don't think I really avoid it, engaging in discussions on other issues while I'm at a cube, because that's not what I'm here for. And I try to do it in a tactful way. And the way that I try to do that, whenever someone brings up another topic, I go to and I ask about the values that they have related to that topic. So, I'd want to know, so, what is it for you that makes, insert topic here, abortion or famine or war or whatever, an important topic, for you? What makes that important? And I'm going to start asking them questions to draw out the values behind what it is that, the points that they're bringing up. The reason I do that is because the values that they talk about are also going to apply to what we're doing here. So I can use it as a way of not like ignoring what they're saying, being genuinely curious about it so they get a chance to share from their perspective. But then I can also segue. I can also use those values that they talk about to segue and say, hey, you know what? It's funny you bring that up, because it's the exact same reason why we're here. Actually, I've never really clearly thought about the connection between these two. But when you said that, it made me realize that this and blah, blah, and I can segue it back into the animal rights conversation, which their ego maybe and their conscience are trying to avoid. So it works pretty well most of the time. And I just don't want to get into these other topics, because that's not, I'll talk about those topics at any other time. I love discussing things, but not at a cube. So that's kind of how I try to manage that. Hope that helps. Oh, and I'm supposed to be looking at the chat as well. Sorry. Okay, and I see that. I'll save that for your question. Super good documentary is The Ghost in Our Machine by Joanne MacArthur. Yeah, Joanne MacArthur. Joanne MacArthur is awesome. She is one of my idols, I would say, in the animal rights movement. She is a photographer from Toronto-based. She travels all over the world, and her photography is just unreal. Like really, really, some of the most powerful images I think that I've seen in this movement. There are some other really, really good photographers out there as well. I don't want to discredit them. I just love Joanne's work. You can find Joanne's work if you search We Animals. She has a few books, like photography books out there, which are well worth it. And she's got stuff all over the place. So We Animals is the name of the project, and Joanne MacArthur is awesome. So yes, that's a good, and Ghost in Our Machine is a good documentary as well. Okay. I'm not sure how to pronounce your name. Ty Hallis. I think you missed my question. I don't know what it is, and possibly because of the webinar software, the internet cutting out, I may have missed it. So if you can just pop it back in here, I will definitely get to it. And Sarah, will you be... Oh, will I be going to the vegan campground in England this summer? I haven't decided yet. Likely. I'll be in Europe for sure in May. There's a big cube happening in Copenhagen, and there's a workshop. So there's like a whole weekend, a 2-day workshop and a cube in the middle. It's going to be really cool. So if you're anywhere near Copenhagen and you want to go May 19th, that weekend, there's going to be a lot of good stuff happening. But yeah, I think I will be. I mean, I haven't planned out my travels yet, but I think I will do my best to get there. So I don't see any more questions in the Q&A. Feel free to keep popping stuff in there. I'm going to go to the questions that I received in advance, which are really, really, all of these questions I really like and I think are really important to discuss. And again, feel free, now I'll watch the chat. Feel free to add your opinion on any of these. So this is from Anne. A lot of good questions. Thank you, Anne. Question number 1. Is it important to watch and read? Is it important to watch and read and be familiar with all references listed on the back of the AV card if one is planning to do active outreach with this group? I don't know if Earthlings, for example, is listed. It is a documentary I have not seen and would find very difficult to watch. I also feel that perhaps if I forced myself to watch the violently graphic images, it might inform my resolve to be more courageous in my advocacy. What are your thoughts? Really good question. So let's start with the first part of the question, which is it important to read and be familiar with all the references listed? Yes, I would say so, 100%. So one of the things that I bring from sales, and one thing that I know is really important in sales, and I would argue in animal rights advocacy, is product knowledge. And product knowledge for us is everything to do with, veganism, animal rights. As much knowledge as you can get, it can't hurt. It's really, really good to know, especially if you're recommending resources. At the very least, like if you make a recommendation, you know specifically what's in that recommendation, and it helps inform your decision as to what recommendations you should be making. So I would recommend becoming familiar with the resources on your local AV's card for sure. And the second one is, to do that, and Earthlings is often on the cards. If there's a documentary like Earthlings or Dominion that's really difficult to watch, should you watch it? Without qualifying my answer, yes, you should. It sucks, and yes, you should. To qualify that answer and to add to that, I would say yes, you should if you were able. And by that I mean by watching that footage, if it's going to paralyze you or have a negative effect on your psychological health, or have cause you to not be able to do activism anymore, or for some time or whatever, no, don't put yourself through something where it's very difficult for you to recover. For me, it is a very, very sad reality that I want to know, and I want to know as best as possible so that I can represent it as accurately as possible. I agree with you as well, Anne, that it fuels my fire to do this. And I watched Dominion when I didn't need to. I didn't need to watch Dominion. In fact, I don't think. No, I take that back. I was going to say I didn't see anything new. I think I did see some new stuff in Dominion that I hadn't seen before. But in general, most of it I'd already seen. So why put yourself through that? That pain. It sucked. I was tearing up in the theater. I was like, I had that same kind of gut-wrenching feeling that I had when I first watched Earthlings. So why do that? Because it just helps me. It helps me represent the animal's experience better. And again, I'll leave it at that. If you can do it, push yourself. Do it with someone else. Have somebody there for emotional support. I'm someone who's just not afraid of sad feelings. I'm well aware that there's a lot of sad stuff in the world. There's also a lot of beautiful stuff, and I feel that there's kind of that balance. And the more open you are to the sad stuff, I think you also find the most beautiful stuff as well. So a great example is this vegan animal rights activism. It's the most difficult thing I've ever seen or witnessed in my life, both in person, going into like slaughterhouses and watching animals being stabbed in the throat, to watching those documentaries. It's horrible, but at the same time, going through all of that and pushing myself to address that and face that head on, I've met the most incredible people in the world, you know, and I mean that genuinely. I've met so many amazing people that I'm lucky to call friends. And so there's that balance, I think. So anyway, that's what I have to say about that one. And it will definitely motivate you, I think, to want to do more. And then you have to still find a balance where you're not overdoing it and you're not burning out and that sort of thing. So just be kind of conscious and mindful about what you're doing. But I'm someone who believes in kind of challenging and pushing yourself. So, yeah. If you're talking about the 24-hour cube, it's in Amsterdam. I don't know when that is, but I would love to go to Amsterdam as well. Again, I love Amsterdam. This one's the 12-hour cube I was talking about, which is the one in Copenhagen on May 19th, but I'm open for a 24-hour cube. Just if you can, like, maybe private message me and let me know when it is, I would be very interested in going. Giovanni says, I've recently watched Dominion, and yeah, it's been hard, but a lot of new information after many years without watching documentaries. Yeah. So even someone that, for me, someone that's pretty on top of things, I think, I'm open to seeing so much. I also learned some new things. So it sucks, but I think it's worth it. I think the payoff is worth it. And make sure you have a good support network. Number 2 from Anne, I love language and its ability to affect change in the way we think about concepts. In my everyday life and in advocacy, I like to use the term become or be vegan instead of go or going vegan. In my view, to go vegan represents simply an action, whereas to become vegan represents both a simple action and a decision to affect change. Just wonder what your thoughts are on this. I agree with you 100%. I made that change a while ago where I started saying be vegan, not go vegan. And I agree with you. I couldn't articulate it as well maybe as you did. I can't even really articulate the exact, I mean, being is I don't know, it's so much more powerful, I think. And you're right, going to me almost sounds like it's like you said, it's an action. It's almost like, to me, it sounds more like a dietary thing. Like when you say, like, go vegan, to me, it sounds, I don't know, in my head, it kind of relates more to plant-based for some reason. Whereas being vegan, that idea of being is so much more, I don't know, powerful. So I don't think it's I don't think it's like a make or break type of thing, but yeah, I've adjusted it. I always say be vegan. Sounds better to me. I'm sorry, I can't give you anything more eloquent than that. Being vegan is a feeling in one's gut. Yeah. Yeah. It's a little different for me. So sorry, not a good answer. Not a good answer for you on that one. Number 3. Oh shoot. It's in Amsterdam, May 11th. Okay. I will probably be there then, because that's the weekend before. Number 3. In one of your talks, you mentioned that activism, I think that is the word you used, rather than veganism, is the moral baseline when advocating for animal liberation. Do you use the word moral in your outreach? I've shied away from it ever since someone close to me and not vegan said that using it in context of other species exploitation is defamatory and accusatory. Cool question. Okay, so first of all, yes, I did say that. Oh yeah, it's been a while, but the presentation I used to do on the SAVE movement was, I included that concept in there, how activism is really the moral baseline. Lots of other people talk about this as well. I think I remember hearing the good example from Earthling Ed. And so, yes, I definitely talk about that. Talking about the word moral, I don't use that word. I don't think I ever use it in my outreach. If I do, it's not on purpose, or not planned anyway. But yeah, no, I don't use it a lot. That's not kind of the point of my outreach. The point of outreach, in my opinion, in general, is not to convince people things that aren't moral. It's not to inspire new values in them, you know, and teach them what's right or wrong. I think people already know what's right or wrong. I think people already have the vegan values, like a lot of people always talk about. We just need to help them align their actions with their values. So instead of speaking of morality, which is coming from my point of view, right? Like my morals or my ethics, which are not really that relevant. They're not even that interesting in the conversation. I'm more interested in talking about their morals and their ethics and asking them to find out about how they feel and what their perception is on these things, what their perception of the problem is, what their perception of the solution is. So it's more about them, and so I don't really usually have a reason to bring that up. I mean, if they bring up the word or a topic around it, of course I might talk about it. But if I'm doing a good job, if I'm on my outreach game, then I will often like maybe give a short answer, but defer back to them and get them to share with me more about what their perception is on it. So. Yes. Oh, interesting. Okay, so since we're on the topic of language here, I just see another question on language that popped up here. It looks like it's from Olivia, so I'm just going to jump into that one there. Olivia, what sort of language do you use or avoid in your activism? I know some people never say murder, rape, or slavery. Equally, I know people who always say non-human animals, carnage, etc. Thoughts? Yeah, great question. We address this. We talk about this in every workshop, and I think it's come up in one of the webinars, and now it's coming up now. So yes, I now avoid those words. When I first started in veganism, when I first started in activism, I used a lot of those words. And the reason why I don't use a lot of, and maybe I'll talk about a few specific ones here that you brought up, but in general, why I don't use these words that are often used, Holocaust is another word that's not in there, but it's included. The reason why I don't use words that refer to human experiences normally is not because I think that it's wrong to use those words. Like, I think that non-human animals have the right to have their experiences accurately represented and not diminished because they're non-human, because we would never say, oh, you can't use these words because it's a different race type of thing. So I think it's speciesist in a way to not recognize the animals' situations very, very clearly and appropriately. However, that being said, I don't think it's terribly effective from my experience using those words, because it's a very easy way for people to become defensive and for people to distract themselves from what's happening on the screens and focus all of their attention on this idea where, you can't compare humans to animals. And yeah, like in some ways you can, in some ways you can't, and I don't want to get into the specifics of that. But the problem is if you say something that really triggers somebody into like fully just not being able to process what's happening here and focusing on values, and they just get lost in that, it's not going to help your conversation. You're going to get into this like a debate on why it's okay to use that or why it's not. And when people are in a defensive state of mind, they're not really able to absorb information or even think rationally themselves. So I try to do everything I can to avoid people becoming defensive. And instead, what I do, and this is a really powerful tool, I think, in life in general, is the concept of speaking in definitions. So instead of saying a word, like any of those words there, just describe what is actually happening. Give the definition for that word in the context, as opposed to saying the word. And so you avoid saying these words that could potentially trigger someone, and you perfectly describe it, right? If I happen to drop a word in, like even like the word veganism sometimes, I like define it. I make sure that the definition is clear, because there's so much potential for ambiguity, for misinterpretation, misunderstanding. So you try and speak in definitions. You'll notice that it helps the conversation a lot. A word like carnist, for example, carnist is animal rights jargon. It's something that we use in our world, and it's great to understand a certain, the concept of carnism, but non-vegans don't use that term. So I don't use it. I don't ever talk about carnism with a non-vegan. If they've watched, if they happen to watch that TED Talk by Melanie Joy, and now they're aware of that term, then we can discuss that and use it. But in general, at a cube, I never use that word. I use non-vegans a lot. I don't think it's threatening. I'm open to suggestions, by the way, if you guys, think there's a really strong reason not to use that word. But when I'm talking, in the animal rights vegan context, I say vegans, and I might say like non-vegans if I'm referring to non-vegans. So yeah, that's what I use. I'm open to suggestions, but it seems to be okay. Non-human animals. Yeah, I will say that. I'll drop that. I don't think it's terribly offensive. I think it's very accurate. I don't think there's a big potential for people being like really triggered by it. But I will also just say animals often, because I know that this other person, that's the terminology they use. So if I use the word animals, I don't. So here's the thing: like, I want to be accurate. But I also don't want to be condescending or patronizing, right? So I don't want this person to be like, "Oh, yeah, okay, you're so ethical," I don't want people to think that, because then they'll get defensive. So I try to balance these terms, like a nice non-human animal term, which might make people think, but if you use it too often, or like one of the worst things you could do is like correct somebody. If someone says animals and like, "Oh, I think you mean non-human animals," like, come on, you just, you're losing the, what is it? Losing the trees for the forest, or the forest for the trees, or something like that. But you're basically getting lost in these details that at the end of the day, are they going to help this person get rid of their speciesist conditioning, or is it just going to give them an excuse to kind of, I don't know, dismiss what you're saying and dismiss you as a cocky, arrogant person, even though you're not, but you want to avoid that. So that is my answer on language. Spending $1 to save a nickel. That's good. It's better than my completely botched tree and forest. Losing the trees for the forest. Guys, help me out. What's the expression? Losing the forest? I don't know. Anyway. Tai Halas. So again, I'm probably butchering your name. I'm sorry. Can't see the forest for the trees. There you go. Thanks, Anne. I knew I could count on you. And we're going to take a break from your questions, and we'll go to some of the webinar questions here. So, Ty, here it is again. Do you have any advice for dealing with the depression, immobilization that sometimes happens when you feel like you're sharing the fear and pain that the animals are feeling? Yes, I can give you some recommendations. I'm not the expert on this by any stretch. Melanie Joy definitely talks a lot about this. Secondary trauma syndrome, I think she calls it STS, but it's about secondary trauma. It's like you are traumatized by witnessing trauma, and it's very real. It happens to people on different levels and different degrees. And, like, yeah, I know a lot of people's answer will be like, well, and I think this myself too. Well, you know what, whatever we go through is nothing compared to what the animals go through, But that's easy for someone like me to say, who manages that secondary trauma fairly well, I think. It doesn't overly depress me. It doesn't immobilize me. I'm still able to function and do the work that I do. If anything, it probably motivates me more. But if you are not like that, like if it depresses you and you don't have any, so before that, here's my support network, or here's how I manage that. One is I surround myself with awesome people who I can vent to, who I can talk to, who I can cry with if necessary. So I have, vegans and activists around me. And if you don't have that physically near you, that's the beauty of the internet. You have people all around the world, so join some good groups, forge some friendships online where you can feel supported. And then the other one is, if you just can't, like if it's so bad that you just can't deal with it, then don't deal with it. Like, not everybody, we're not the same. So I don't pressure yourself, like challenge yourself. I challenge myself to do these things, but I don't put unnecessary pressure on myself. So that's, oh, and also take time off, take breaks. I'm bad at this, but take breaks. Schedule time. You know, if you're someone who really, really, I get it. I get that, like, we feel like we have to, you know, we can't work hard enough, but also recognize there's a whole team, right? We're a big global team. There's always people doing stuff, and we have to take our rest times and our rest breaks, and that might look different for different people. Don't feel guilty. I'm on a somewhat of a break right now because I was traveling so much last year. I was like super stressed. I'm back in Toronto, but I'm like on a lower level right now. I'm not pushing myself as hard because I need to like recover. I need to refuel, recharge before I go back out there and start, you know, pushing myself really hard. So you guys, you know yourself best. Don't feel guilty about that. Don't let other people make you feel guilty, and just do the best that you can. So I hope that that's helpful. And by the way, if I can help in any way, please don't hesitate to reach out, you know, through any social media, Amazing Vegan Outreach. Drop me a note, you know, drop me a voice message or something like that. And when I have time, sometimes I apologize if I don't reply quick enough sometimes, but I try to get to everybody's messages. So just, you know, I'm happy to respond with any, you know, anything that I've learned, anything that I've experienced, and hopefully it helps. Sarah, a book to recommend about activism or to improve our activism? I will admit, oh, sorry. I was going to admit that I couldn't think of anything, but I can. One of the things that's impacted me the most has been my introduction to Kingian nonviolence. So I'm going to type that in here to the chat. Kingian nonviolence. And Kingian nonviolence is the philosophy and strategy that Martin Luther King used and relied on during the civil rights movement. And there's a lot of good reading material that you can find here. eastpointpeace.org. So this website that I'm linking into the chat here, it's eastpointpeace.org. And there's a reading list on there, and there's all these different books that talk about Kingian nonviolence. And if you are someone that likes reading, I would recommend that, because that philosophy is so powerful and I think necessary. And I wish that more activists knew about it and adopted it into their activism. I think that's one of the things also that, going back to the last question of like, you know, not being immobilized, not being paralyzed, not being burnt out. I think that the things that I've learned through Kingian nonviolence really help, like a lot. Yeah. So that would be my best recommendation. Anything on Kingian nonviolence, and that website has a lot of the like a reading list there. Amanda, in your video, How to Stay Calm, you talk about how you aren't typically triggered by carnage, and you seem to credit this to your understanding of human psychology. Is there anything else that we can do to prevent from being triggered? Good question based on what I just said. So I'll just repeat. The ideas, the principles behind Kingian nonviolence are beautiful and are enlightening and are, you know, they're actually effective as well. So it's not just like this hippie thing where it's like, yeah, just peace and love and like whatever. It's like, it is, but it is also really effective in, I think, in a philosophy to create social change and to fight against injustice. I think a really simple way, from another expression that I'd heard before this, but a good way to sum that up, is being hard on the problem and soft on the people. And recognizing that we are very, very imperfect human beings, and that we are defensive, that we are egotistical, all of us, you know, we're triggered in different ways. I know my brother can really trigger me that way, even though I can be pretty chill most of the time, but he can really get to me. And so when you recognize these things, and ideally when you can pre-plan for them. So when I go to a cube, you know, I know that people are going to be defensive. I've already heard, I think almost everything. I've seen people laugh. I've seen people mock us. I've been in disruptions. I've been hit and punched, and people try to break my equipment, my camera gear. Like these are things that normally would have really set me off in the past, you know? But because I'm like going into these events thinking that it's possible and that there are likely people that are going to do that, and I already pre-planned how I want to react to them, to lead by example, to promote peace over violence. I do a pretty good job of it. I'm not perfect, but I look at myself now and it's just like, who is this person? Because it's not who I was, you know, even just a few years ago, before that Kingian nonviolence training. So if you can go to that Kingian nonviolence training, it's life-changing. Like I don't want to oversell it, but it's really, really powerful. So it's run by Direct Action Everywhere, has at least one trainer, Chris, who does it. I'm certified as a trainer. I actually went for a 4-day training, but I'm an assistant trainer, so I'm not officially certified to run a full 2-day workshop on Kingian nonviolence by myself. But hopefully one day I will. And it is, oh man, I can't recommend it enough. So I'll just let you guys go and check out that website. And if you can attend a workshop, do it. Sarah, what do you think about civil disobedience as activism? These are great questions, and they're perfectly, like, they link perfectly. Good segues. What do I think about civil disobedience as activism? I mean, being an outlaw, but without being violent to people. I love it. I think it's great. I think that there are a lot of things to consider when you're doing that. I don't think it's for everyone, and I don't think everyone should expect themselves to do that. Kingian nonviolence, direct action, civil disobedience is definitely a way of life for courageous people. It's one of the principles of Kingian nonviolence, and it's challenging and it's difficult to do. You also have to have the right situation. Like if you have, you know, dependents at home, children that depend on you, and you plan to go and do an action where you could potentially be arrested, you know, and you might spend time in jail. Like, do you want to do that? Is that the right decision? You know, so we don't need everyone doing these things, but if you're able to, and I mean, there's so much more to think about than just that. But if you're able to do it, it's really, really powerful, I think. So peaceful, civil disobedience, nonviolent, I think it's really powerful. And again, that goes back to the Kingian nonviolence principles. Yeah. I mean, I could talk about that topic quite a bit, but I'll save it. If you guys want to, you know, if you want to discuss it more, you can always message me privately, and I can maybe share some more info with you on it. But yeah, I think it's great, and I respect people. The amount of respect that I have for people that do that put themselves in harm's way. I know people that are going through now, and that have gone through, you know, massive legal struggles. But it's a necessary part of the movement. Think Martin Luther King was arrested dozens of times, and it's just part of it. But again, not everyone has to do it, but you can support those people. You can share their stories, share their videos. You can support them financially. People that are going through, you know, big trials or spending time in jail, like, it's tough, right? So if you have the means, if you don't want to go and put yourself in harm's way, but you have the means to support them, support them. Amanda, do you believe that vegans have the moral responsibility to engage in activism? Someone asked me this question in a different way, a more loaded way. And they said, I think this was on the last webinar, they said, are vegans who don't do activism bad people, or something like that? Yeah, it was a little bit more loaded. And no, I don't think they're bad people. I don't think that non-vegans are bad people. I don't, you know. Do I believe that we have the moral responsibility to engage in activism? I mean, for myself, I do. It's why I said that, you know, activism is the moral baseline, not veganism. And I used to say that veganism was a lot in my earlier activism. And I think that we do have this, I think we have a moral responsibility to help when we can. As soon as you start if you start putting yourself into harm's way, then I don't necessarily believe that it becomes a moral responsibility. Like if someone's beating a dog And I could very well be injured or killed for trying to intervene. I don't think I have a moral responsibility. That's where that courage part kind of comes in. But there are usually things that we can do. Like I could call 911 and safely, do something to try and stop that. So I do believe that we have that responsibility. And the thing that I think for me makes me feel that way is the simple fact that if I were in that situation, if I were the victim, I would hope and almost expect people to do something for me. So if I expect that from others and I would hope that from others, then how can I not do that for others, And it's just tricky because it's difficult. I don't know. It's not easy. Just being vegan for a lot of people is very difficult. Being an activist is just weird, right? I think it's becoming less weird now, but people still view it as very fringe. I mean, if you think about veganism as being a small group of people, well, how many vegans are actually like, not full-time, but like regular activists, very, very small percentage. So it's even weirder. But I think a lot of it is fear of the unknown. When you start doing it, and I find that a lot of people around me, a lot of non-vegans respect the work that I'm doing, and it's motivated them to explore this topic more and think about it. So anyway, I'm kind of going off here. But yes, I do think that we should challenge ourselves to do that. And there are so many different forms of activism that I don't think that you should feel bad if you don't align with one or you're not able to do one. There are tons and tons of different forms of activism we can do. Or even like we talked about earlier, supporting people that are doing those actions if you're unable to do them yourself. So, yeah. Guys, I'm sorry I've been bad on the chat here. Gary Orofsky, Gary Orofsky has, he was his speech, best speech you'll ever hear was really, really impactful for me. Really, really had an impact on me. Sarah Doe, just in the chat here. When I outreach, I go as Spock. Pure logic and fact. It is my way to avoid being triggered. Interesting. I'd be interested to know what you mean by that. When you say like pure logic and fact, like I actually, although I love being logical and factual, and if I were to debate someone, of course. When I'm outreaching, though, I don't actually really depend so much on that because people are often not thinking or speaking from a rational place. They're speaking from an emotional place. So before I go into any sort of logic or facts, what I tend to do is explore their emotional reactions to what's happening, their values that are leading to those emotions, their perception of why this is happening in the first place. Like if most people feel like you and I, and we're against what we're seeing here on the screen, then what causes this to happen? How does this actually happen if most of society is against it? And making people think about it, having them think of solutions themselves as to how we can possibly end it. So in the Powerful Questions webinar, I kind of go through all of the questions, which are really based on not focusing on facts and logic, but focusing on their own perception and drawing out their values. And usually what happens, what I notice is that when people tend to just focus on delivering logic and facts, that's where debates happen. And debates are generally unproductive because people tend to leave more convinced of their own ideas from a debate because they've been forced to defend them so much. So I try to stay away from that, like teaching them things and more helping them explore things. And then maybe when it's appropriate in the conversation, once they've opened up and really now they're allowing themselves to accept information, or they're asking me about things, now I can deliver more facts and maybe a little bit more logic, but carefully, and then always involving them in the conversation. So anyway, and I'll go to your comment here, and then I'll go to your, I think you have one or two more questions here. So this is, in my view, similar to the question about disruptions. I know some vegans who are unable to do advocacy because of personal circumstances. It's tricky. Excuse me. Personal circumstances to do advocacy or disruptions. Those are kind of two, I see those as, well, I guess disruption is a form of advocacy. I mean, there's so many different ways of doing advocacy that hopefully someone can do something in some form. And if they can't, then again, there's other ways to support people. I can't stress it enough. Supporting people who, you know, are going in and, you know, busting into slaughterhouses and doing blockades and stuff like that, or people that are going to jail. Oh, activists that are in jail, there are ways to write to them in jail. Like, imagine if you're stuck in jail for 5 years because you did some liberation or something, and you know, getting letters from people is probably super motivating. So things like that. There are ways to support. Just you got to think outside the box a little bit. Okay, you know what, Sarah, I'm going to hold your question for a second. I'm going to go to Anne's question, her next question that she submitted in advance, which is, ooh, that's a good one. Okay, I'll leave that question for last. So I'll go to the last question here. What positive role, if any, do you feel that vigils outside slaughterhouses play in vegan outreach? I have been to quite a few vigils, mostly local and small, and often wonder if the perceived outcome is valuable enough to warrant the time spent. Sorry guys, just 1 second here. Sorry about that, guys. What positive role? So vigils on outreach. This is a bit of a tricky one because I don't think that vigils are really related to outreach. I mean, there's an opportunity to do some outreach at vigils, but that's not the main purpose of the vigil. So vigils exist for, and I think are important for a few reasons. One of them is a direct, what's the word I'm looking for here? Can't come up with a word. But this industry operates on secrecy, right? The only reason why I think that animal products ever took off to the point that they did is because people don't see what happens. So a vigil is really the only time where we can connect with, see, document, and share the individual stories easily. Of course, you can kind of go into farms and slaughterhouses. It's more difficult. So here is the easy way that anybody can do that. This here, cell phones, are the reason why I think the movement has grown so quickly, because we have this, you know, the ability to record and share, disseminate information really, really quickly. So we should use that, I think. So that's one reason. The idea of not ignoring the victims as well, from you know, we are the people who are most conscious about their plight, and so we are the ones who, we're the only ones who would ever go out of our way, put ourselves in a situation, you know, to go to a slaughterhouse, which is just nasty and disgusting and horrible and sad, and just to be there for them. And the analogy that I give is that when we lose someone, like a loved one, a family member, think about when they're sick. You know, my dad went through cancer. He went to the hospital, and, you know, in his last few weeks, when he was in palliative care, he had people visiting him from all over the place, like coworkers, friends, family members from all over the world. They flew in. Like it was just this constant flow of people that went to visit him and to be there with him in his last moments. And it's that, you know, I think it's in our nature to accompany the ones that we love in their final moments, you know, both from our perspective to kind of say our goodbyes, but also for them just to be there, you know, even if, for example, let's suppose that my father had been unconscious, and he was at towards the end, right? But there were still people there visiting him, right? So it's kind of the same idea. I feel that, you know, that the reason I go to vigils is for that, I don't know, just to be there for them. And of course, your presence is really powerful. So the ability, like I said in the first one, to share their stories, to speak from experience as well. So what made me an activist was going to a vigil, was actually connecting and seeing a cow. And every time I go, it just kind of reignites that fire to you know, you remember the actual individuals that you're fighting for. And I'll admit, it's sometimes easy to forget that a little bit, to just kind of look at it as a broad group, which is harder to connect with personally. So those vigils really help with that. Sometimes you can also provide relief from weather conditions, specifically heat. I think with water, in the cold, it's not much you can do. But when it's really hot or animals are thirsty, you can give them water, which is, it helps. I know it's not a lot and they're going to go die, but it's something. And I think that the alternative to doing that is to do nothing. So I've also seen really, really powerful images come from vigils, and especially come from people interacting with animals, I should say non-human animals, at the vigils, and providing them with comfort and care and love and water. It's just such a basic human thing to do. And I think it really impacts a lot of people when they see people that care enough to do that. So anyway, I could probably talk about a few more points, but that's my general idea when it comes to vigils. Okay, Sarah, I see another question here from you. So did you also acknowledge your others' cognitive dissonance by becoming vegan? Did you also acknowledge your? I'm not sure I understand that. Not sure I understand that question. If you can maybe clarify that in the chat, Sarah. Did you also acknowledge your others' cognitive dissonance by becoming vegan? I mean, cognitive dissonance is very common in humans. It's a way for us to like deal with stuff, I think, and to kind of, just to simplify our thoughts, which is it's not good or bad. It is what it is. We just need to help. We need to do our best to become aware of our own and help others become aware of theirs. But that is specifically what the challenge is that people, and this is why people aren't bad. This is like, they're just confused and they're just indoctrinated into the idea of the speciesist system, is that people hold these two different views, right? Two opposing views. On one hand, they care about animals. They don't want to see them suffer. They can almost often get to the point where, this isn't right. Yet they're the ones who are directly responsible for all those things happening, right? They're the ones who are paying people to do those things, and they're the ones buying the products, and they're somehow okay with that as well, right? It's really, really strange. So, I mean, I can go into why I think that happens, but the more important thing is just, it happens, it exists, and our job, I think, is to help them, tactfully explore that, recognize that, and help kind of help them realize that this value that they hold over here is so much more important than the value or the actions that they've been taught their whole lives, and then, like all of us did, is just saying, okay, well, crap, if I can just, make little changes over here so that my values here are properly represented by my actions, then why wouldn't I? I know it seems so simple for us, but it's challenging. Obviously, we all know that. Sarah, for example, I realized my footprint and did go zero waste. Oh, cool. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. So, there's so many other things. Definitely, I've become much more aware of things going vegan. It kind of comes with the territory, I think, because you start becoming more conscious. You start thinking more consciously, avoiding plastics and that sort of thing. And zero waste, that's amazing. And these are things like, I think that's good. I think that's right to do. And that would be something that I struggle with. And it's kind of embarrassing to say. It's weird because we know, like with veganism, we're so good, right? Like we've done a really good job, and we feel very confident and comfortable that we're living in alignment with our values. Yet somebody brings up something like that, and the amount of waste that we generate. And I try to reduce and stuff, but maybe I need to make a bigger effort. Actually, I'm meeting with some friends tonight who are like pretty much zero waste, which is so cool. And so I'm gonna pick their brains on that and get more tips. Maybe it's impossible to be like 100% zero waste, but they produce like tiny amounts of waste, which is really, really cool. And buying, yeah, I tend to buy organic as well, and trying to find fair trade, and it's challenging, and yeah, one thing at a time as well. Like, don't overload yourself, but do your best, and I'll try to do that tonight with my friends in that conversation. So the last one, this might take us a little slightly bit over time. We have 3 minutes left, but we also had that interruption in the middle, so I'll go a little bit more, maybe like 5 or 10 minutes over. Anne's last question. So could you review your stance on the Liberation Pledge? I really appreciate that you have shared how you engage with your family about this. It feels very hypocritical of me not to be clear, but honestly, I'm very afraid of the outcome and wonder how a negative outcome would help the animals in any way. This is kind of a personal issue and perhaps not pertinent for today's webinar. No, I think it is. So still interested in hearing again about why you feel the Liberation Pledge is important. I think, Anne, you've outlined specifically, what pledge? Good. So the Liberation Pledge is kind of 3 things. Excuse me. It is a pledge to, first of all, not consume any animal products. So to publicly refuse to consume animal products. The second one is to publicly refuse to sit at the same table where animal products are being consumed. And most specifically, I think it's animal bodies, meat, but a lot of people extend it to include all animal products. And then the third one is to encourage others to do the same. So for anyone who's not familiar with the pledge, I would really strongly recommend that you check out a video on my YouTube channel, on the Amazing Vegan Outreach YouTube channel, called Why Vegans Should Be More Annoying. I've referenced that in other webinars, so check that one out. It goes in depth into why I took the pledge, how I see it being extremely effective. There's definitely, I touch a lot on Kingian nonviolence as well that we talked about in the webinar. So it's all in there. It's the best way I can explain it. And for your point is pretty much, I think, why a lot of people are hesitant and worried to take on such a meaningful or such a, I don't want to say like, I mean, it's a pledge that really impacts and could have a significant impact on your life and on the people around you. So the way I think about it is this. If someone were eating a dog at a barbecue, would I feel comfortable sitting at the same table with them while they just cook their dog and were eating it? And of course the answer is no, especially if you know the dog. I mean, yeah, but the answer is no. And so the question then is, well, then what would lead me to do that if it's a different animal, right? And we use, as vegans, we use, as advocates, we use that analogy. We say, well, why love one but eat the other, right? So we ask people, what's the difference between a dog and a pig? Yet we wouldn't sit at the table with the dog being eaten, but we would with a pig. So ethically, I wasn't being consistent when I did that, but I also believe in being effective over being right. So I had to think of, what effect would that have? Would it have a positive effect or a negative effect? And like what you said, I knew, and I know that by doing this, I could very well have negative reactions from people. However, the way that I talk about it, and I really do my best to share an example of that in that video, why vegans should be more annoying. The way you talk about it is in like a completely non-threatening way. You share your personal experience, you share your emotions around the issue, you share why you choose to do that and why it's so difficult for you to be around those products, and at the same time, how important it is for you that the time that you spend with the people you love is a happy time for you, not just for them, but for you as well. And what happens is it doesn't become a happy time, right? It becomes a very sad time. And I struggled with that, not just internally, but also the conversations that were had over those meals. People were very defensive. They would attack veganism because they were in the process. Well, not because, but it was partly fueled by the fact that they're in the process of eating those bodies, and it's very difficult for someone to just say, "Yeah, this is really wrong what I'm doing." and eating it, right? Like it's very difficult for them to get to that. So instead, what I do is I invite people. I don't exclude myself from those meals. I invite people to join me for meals that are vegan, that don't have any violence towards animals included in them. And if that means going to a restaurant or me cooking or helping them cook or whatever that is, I invite them to do that. And if they exclude me from that, so it's not me excluding myself. If they say, no, you know what, we appreciate or whatever, we don't really care if you feel sad about this stuff, we're still going to eat our animal products, then I'm being excluded by them, and I don't judge them. I don't make them feel bad for it. I just say, you know what, I do understand how it's so difficult to maybe change habits and to, explore or try different foods. And, I don't hold that against you. I know how difficult it is. And it obviously it's going to make me sad that I can't be here with you guys, but I do want to see you. So, how do you think we can work out ways where we can spend time together, we can laugh and, have good times and love each other and that sort of thing without me having to suffer through that, And it could mean showing up after a meal and sometimes it just takes a little bit of time. It takes you being strong. It takes you not being defensive. You have to take the high road. But I really like the fact, sorry, I'm speaking too quickly. I really like the fact that I am in control of this conversation, of this topic, of what I choose to do. And I choose not to put myself in situations where I would be uncomfortable, and I'm ethically uncomfortable about being around that. Like, should I be here or should I not be here? I don't put myself there. And what I found is that the conversations, a lot of people are also afraid, I think, some of the objections that I see to this online are that people feel that they're going to lose the ability to have conversations about veganism. And I promise you, over 2 years now, I don't believe that I've ever lost the opportunity to talk about veganism. I feel that I've created more effective opportunities to talk about it. And what I've seen is that when people often do, when people join me for vegan meals or they join me at a vegan restaurant, they are much more open to the topic. They're much more curious, especially when they're like enjoying this food and they're like, oh my God, this is so good. I'm like, I know it is. That's what I've been trying to say for the last 5 years. But when they're actually enjoying the food, they're just more open to it. And even if they don't join you, still that conversation is really powerful, and it makes sure people understand how serious of a topic this is for you. The key is being so soft on the people, because they're going to be defensive. You don't have to do anything to make them defensive. If anything, you have to be so soft on them so that they don't blame you. They don't call you an a-hole for making this decision. You want them to just understand where you're coming from. And if they can understand you, that's a win. The next win is when they start helping to accommodate you, and work with them, like solution with them. Say, hey, I really need your help. I really am worried about this because I don't want our relationship to suffer, right? Tell them how you feel and be vulnerable and open and honest. Tell them about the fear that you have. Talk to your son about how afraid you are that, your relationship with him is going to be ruined or harmed because of a decision that you're making. Like, you're not imposing veganism on him. You're not saying you have to go vegan or I'll never talk to you. But at the same time, when if he's against your choices, maybe take some time to find out, like, what is it that makes you so opposed to me making this decision for my life, and see what he says, and see if you can get like a more vulnerable and open dialogue happening. That's my suggestion for that. Sarah, you said that you're already doing it, and I'm really being maybe hated. If you haven't, and if anyone who's on this, if you have taken the pledge or you do live it and you want to like officially take it and keep track, there's a group of people that keep track of how many people around the world have taken the pledge. You can go to liberationpledge.com. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. You guys can liberationpledge.com. Somebody can verify that for me by clicking on that link. But you can actually sign up there. You can register, and then it just kind of tracks how many people have taken it. Oh, and by the way, there's also a support group on Facebook called the Liberation Pledge Support Group. and what's it called? Liberation Pledge support group. And yeah, just tons of people there discussing it with their challenges on how they live it at work, at weddings, at all types of stuff. And really, really cool stuff. I've learned a lot from reading some of the comment threads in there. No, yes. I was just looking at the people. So some people no, some people yes. Yeah. I'm super passionate about that, and I think it's just such a super powerful form of activism. Imagine if every vegan did that. You know, just the disruptive nature of it. So it's also disruptive, by the way. It's a way of nonviolent, peaceful disruption. You're disrupting the normalcy of eating animals, and you know the violence that's attached to that, that's so often ignored. Like, you're bringing that to the table. You know, forgive the pun, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, it's a really powerful form of disruption as well. So if anyone has questions about it, please don't hesitate. Message me on any social media, and I will gladly get back to you. Instagram's a good one. If you don't already follow the AVO channel, Amazing Vegan Outreach, just because I can record voice messages back to you better than some other ones. I can also do it in Messenger, but not on the AVO page. Anyway, I'm rambling. Sorry about that. Let's take one more question here from Olivia, because I can see it's related to the pledge, and then we'll wrap it up. So if you guys have any last kind of comments or last things, feel free to pop them into the chat. This is the last question that I'll take on the Q&A. So how do you navigate the Liberation Pledge if, for example, someone is drinking coffee during a meeting and it is ambiguous whether or not it has dairy? Sometimes it's just hard to tell, and it seems out of place to ask every time. Great question, and I will, the way that I manage the pledge is proactively. So I think it's much more difficult to manage and to live the pledge if you are reactive. So if you go to get coffee with someone and they put dairy milk into their coffee and then sit down with you, or if you're not even sure, and then you have to, and then you feel like you have to ask, and they say dairy, oh, well, you know what, I can't actually sit here with you. That's really challenging. So the best way, I think, to do it is to proactively talk to the people that you're going to be spending time with. It could be coworkers, family, friends, whatever, and let them know in advance. That's a really key portion to making this a lot easier, a lot smoother, is letting them know in advance that whenever you get together, you know, you really don't want to be around that. And for kind of the reasons I talked about, and I go more in depth in that YouTube talk. But let them know why that is, and then when you're in that situation, hopefully if they're respectful, which a lot of people are, like, they will ask you, like, hey, is this okay? Are you okay with this? Whatever. It's happened to me a lot, and people will ask that. And so then you they're asking you, and you get the opportunity to share kind of why it really hurts you and why it bothers you, remind them. But in a worst case scenario where, like, I don't know, you're sitting somewhere, you can't, you know, whatever, a new group of people join and they bring animal products to the table, I would just say, hey guys, I'm really sorry. I really don't mean to, like, offend you guys, or you know, just please don't take this the wrong way. And then I would give my explanation, you know. So I'm really soft on them. I would tell them about my personal experiences with, like, slaughterhouses, with you know, if it's vigils or whatever it is that, you know, it's in your head when you think about these animal products, and then talk about why it's so kind of sad for you to be around that, and you just can't. It's kind of like you can't really be around that, but you don't mean any personal offense to them, and you're going to go for a walk, finish your food, and then, like, meet up with them after or something like that. And it's just like, people are like, whoa, like, it's actually really shocking and disruptive in a really kind of soft way to people. And I honestly feel that, like, your absence in that situation can speak louder than any words at that moment. And you better believe that if you talk, like, these people will ask you about this. The topic will come up at some point, and you've set the tone really well, I think, for it. Especially if you have to be really, in my opinion, you have to be really soft on the people as to why you're doing it. And they'll tend to respect you. So not always. Sometimes some people think you're an asshole, but very, very rarely, from my experience. So I hope that helps. Guys, thank you very much for sticking around, for joining this webinar. I'm actually glad it was a small one. It was a little bit more intimate. We got to focus on all of your questions, and we didn't really go too much overtime. So I hope that was helpful. I will probably try to cut this one up and fix some of the technical issues that happened in it. But I'll post this one as well on the AVO YouTube channel. I think there's still one left to post, but anyway, I'll look into that. And of course, as always, it'll always be included in the video library as well on the Amazing Vegan Outreach website, amazingveganoutreach.com. The last thing that I always talk about is if you find these webinars useful and helpful, please consider supporting AVO and the work that I do. There's so many people that are supporting right now, and thank you so much for that. And if you are not someone that's supporting yet and you want to, there's no such thing as too small of a donation. I know it's so many people, it seems silly, like $1 a month, if that's all that you can afford, but $1 a month actually goes a long way. And if a lot of people do that, it allows me to continue doing this work. So please consider that. You can also find the options to support AVO on the AVO website. At the top, it says support AVO, and you can see those options. So thank you guys so much for attending the Ask Me Anything webinar, and I will see you guys on the next webinar. All right, take care, guys. Peace. Bye.